I'm standing in the dark with a shotgun across my chest, watching a man pour gasoline near my hay shed, and the only thing running through my head is, this is really happening. The wind is pushing the fumes straight toward me. My hands aren't shaking. I thought they would be, but when you've been pushed this far, your body just decides. No more thinking, just motion. Stop. My voice doesn't sound like mine. It sounds flat, cold. He freezes. Moonlight catches the side of his face. Scarred, hard, the kind of face you see and know immediately this guy's done worse. He's holding a red gas can in one hand. The other hand is still reaching for his lighter. He smiles. You won't shoot, he says. I don't blink. You're trespassing. Night, with gasoline, heading toward a structure. That's arson. And in this state, I'm allowed to defend my property. The smile dies. Behind him, about 100 yards back, I can see the black pickup he came in. Lights off. Engine still ticking. Someone planned this. Someone paid him to be here. And I know exactly who. 3 weeks ago, I inherited 1,600 acres of ranch land. I thought I was getting peace and quiet. Instead, I got a war with the HOA next door, and their president, a woman who turned fear into a business model. Her name was Sandra Kellerman, and she just made the worst mistake of her life. Let me back up. 3 weeks earlier, I'm standing at the front gate of what's supposed to be my land my grandfather left me, and there's a bright yellow paper taped to the wooden bars like a slap across the face. HOA violation notice. Fine. $700. I actually laughed, not because it was funny, because my brain couldn't process what I was reading. They were fining me for a gate my grandfather built 40 years ago with his own hands. On my property, the evening air smelled like pine sap and dirt. Freedom, I thought. I'd left the city for this. Left the cramped office, the fluorescent lights, the meetings where no one remembered my name 5 minutes later. Now I'm staring at a piece of paper that says I owe money to people I've never met. My name is Marcus Brennan, and up until 72 hours ago, I was nobody. Now I'm standing in the middle of Tall Pines Estate, 1,600 acres that belonged to my family for generations, holding a violation notice from an HOA I never joined, never signed a single document for. You have a problem? The voice came from behind me, sharp, cold. I turned. A white SUV sat idling on the edge of the paved road. The window rolled down slow, like whoever was inside wanted me to feel the weight. The woman behind the wheel looked mid-40s. Blonde hair styled like she had a standing appointment. Sunglasses covering half her face even though the sun was setting. She wasn't looking at me like a neighbor. She was looking at me like something that needed to be corrected. And that's when I knew this was only the beginning. This area is part of Crestwood Meadows HOA, she said. Her voice had that fake sweet edge to it, like she was explaining something to a child. That gate isn't on the approved list. You'll need to remove it and pay the fine. I just stared at her. Then I laughed. Short, dry, barely a sound. You're talking about the gate on my ranch? She tilted her head. Her lips curled just slightly. Your ranch isn't part of this community. And even if it were, rules are rules. That was the first time I met Sandra Kellerman, HOA president, professional tyrant, the kind of person who weaponizes paperwork. She didn't wait for me to respond, just rolled the window back up, slow and deliberate, and drove off. I stood there watching her taillights disappear down the road. The violation notice fluttered in my hand. The air out here was different from the city. It didn't let you hide from what you were feeling. And what I felt right then was a cold knot forming in my gut. Not fear. Something sharper. I hadn't even stepped inside the house yet when I heard boots on gravel. An older guy in a faded cap was standing at the gate. Weathered face. Tired eyes. Hey, he said. Name's Roy Hastings. I live just past the ridge. He paused. Let me guess. You just met Sandra. I nodded. Roy let out a long, heavy sigh. The kind you only make when you've done it 100 times before. Welcome to the HOA, he said quietly. And if you think what just happened was bad, you might want to sit down before I tell you the rest. We sat on the old wooden steps of the porch. Roy didn't waste time. Fines for trash cans left out 10 minutes too long. Fines for garden hoses being visible. Fines for mailbox paint that's the wrong shade of beige. He said it like he was reading a grocery list. Flat, exhausted. Then his voice dropped. There was a woman named Dorothy Crane, 84 years old, widow, lived here over 30 years. I watched his face. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking past me, toward the community lights in the distance. She had a flower garden, roses, daisies. Her husband planted them before he died. Sandra said the flowers weren't on the approved list. My chest tightened. Dorothy got fined. Every week. Small amounts at first, then bigger. She was living on a pension. She couldn't keep up. Roy stopped, took a breath. Sandra put a lien on the house. A house that was paid off decades ago. Dorothy had to sell. I felt something cold slide down my spine. And guess who bought it? Roy looked at me now. His eyes weren't angry. They were hollow. Sandra, through some shell company. She's renting it out now. For profit. The wind picked up. The pines swayed. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. No one stopped her? I asked. Roy laughed. No humor in it. Just bitterness. Anyone who speaks up becomes the next target. I sat there in the fading light, staring out at the field. My land. And all I could think about was an 84-year-old woman losing her home over flowers. That night, I called my family lawyer. His name was Paul Dennison. He handled my grandfather's will. When I told him about the fine, about Sandra, he went quiet for a long time. Then he said something I'll never forget. Marcus, you didn't just inherit land. You inherited a secret. And if Sandra knew what it was, she never would have taped that notice to your gate. Couldn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about Dorothy, about the flowers, about the house she lost. The next morning, Paul called me into his office. It smelled like old paper and wood polish, the kind of place that held secrets. He had files spread across his desk, thick ones, pages yellowed at the edges. Marcus, he said quietly, you own a lot more than you think. He unrolled a massive map. Old, faded ink. But the lines were clear. Paul pointed to a section right in the middle of my ranch. A neat square. This land was leased to a developer almost 100 years ago. Long-term ground lease. 99 years. I stared at the shape. It matched Crestwood Meadows perfectly. The roads, the parks, the clubhouse. Leased, not sold. I asked. Paul nodded. When did it expire? He looked me in the eye. June 1st, this year. The room went still. Under the original contract, Paul said, all common land reverts to the landowner. That's you. My heart pounded. I thought about Sandra, the smug look on her face, the $700 fine. They don't know, I said. Paul pulled out papers, certified letters, delivery confirmations. I sent formal notice. 1 year out, 6 months out, 90 days before expiration. All received. He paused. They never responded. I leaned forward. How? Paul's face stayed neutral. Either incompetence or someone buried it. Sandra's face flashed in my mind. She knew. She had to. And that meant she thought I was just some clueless heir who wouldn't figure it out. She was wrong. Paul and I worked out a plan. Not private, public, transparent, legal, impossible to ignore. He contacted the county. We'd establish boundaries in front of authorities. If Sandra wanted to perform, we'd give her a stage so bright she couldn't hide. 3 days later, I'm standing on the road into Crestwood Meadows. Early morning, wind cutting through the pines. Sheriff Daniel Cross stood next to me, tired eyes. one hand on his belt. Next to him was Linda Marsh, county clerk, holding files so thick she needed both arms. Across from us stood Sandra Kellerman. Perfect posture, tailored blazer, jewelry flashing, eyes like knives. "I don't understand why this man is here," Sandra said sweetly. "This is private HOA property." I said nothing, leaned against my truck, sipped coffee. Silence broke her rhythm. Sheriff Cross spoke. "That's what we're clarifying, ma'am." Linda stepped forward, laid a document across the patrol car hood. Survey map, clean lines, county seal. "This is Tall Pines Estate," Linda said. "Marcus Brennan is listed as owner." Sandra waved dismissively. "He owns the ranch around us. We own our roads, our parks." I laughed quietly. Sandra snapped toward me. "What's funny? Hearing someone claim ownership of land under their feet. That isn't theirs." Linda placed another sheet down, red outline, enclosing the entire community. "This land was leased," Linda said calmly. "Long-term ground lease. Never sold." Pause. "That lease expired June 1st. The air froze. Sandra's face went white. "That's impossible," she said. Her voice cracked. "Our lawyers." "Your lawyers received 3 certified letters," Linda interrupted. 1 year prior, 6 months, 90 days before expiration. She pulled out delivery confirmations. "All received. You never responded." Sandra stepped back. Sheriff Cross turned to me. "So when he's standing here, he's not trespassing." Linda nodded. "Legally, the only person who can't trespass here is Mr. Brennan." Sandra's mouth opened. No sound came out. Sandra's hands were shaking. "This isn't over," she said, voice trembling but still venomous. "I will sue you." I straightened up, looked her in the eye. "Sandra," I said, just her name, no title. "Welcome to my ranch." The meeting ended. No handcuffs, no shouting. But as Sandra walked to her SUV, her shoulders were stiff, like she was holding herself together by sheer will. Sheriff Cross shook his head, muttered about HOA nightmares. Linda gathered her files, looked at me with respect and sympathy mixed. "Prepare yourself," she said quietly. "People like her don't accept losing." I nodded. That afternoon, Paul sent a draft letter, formal invitation to the HOA board, proposing a public meeting for peaceful transition. I signed it. A week later, the response came, not from a lawyer. Another violation notice, taped to my gate. HOA violation notice. Fine. $700. Unauthorized agricultural structure. I stared at it, thought about Dorothy, the garden, the silence. The wind picked up. The notice shook violently. I tore it in half, not from anger, because I finally understood. For Sandra, peace was never an option. 2 weeks passed. False calm. Then Roy called. Voice alert now. "Marcus, Sandra's been meeting someone. Big guy. Black truck. Tattoos. Not local." My chest tightened. "How many times?" 3 this week. Last night, she handed him a thick envelope. I hung up, called Paul. "Could be a PI," Paul said slowly. "Could be intimidation." Pause. "Could be worse." That night, I sat on the porch, grandfather's shotgun across my lap. Not to play hero, but because he taught me when someone uses darkness, they've crossed the line. The wind moved through the field. I waited. Nothing happened that night, or the next. Third night, I heard an engine, not passing, stopping. I checked the camera feed. Black pickup, lights off, parked 100 yards from the fence. A man stepped out, tall, broad. He stood there, staring toward the house, then pulled something from the truck bed. Gas can. My blood turned cold. The hay shed, wind blowing straight toward it. I didn't think. Moved, circled behind the house, stayed in shadow. Phone ready. He reached the fence. found a weak spot, pushed the wire aside. As he slipped through, I stepped out. Stop! Shotgun aimed at his chest. He froze. Moonlight caught his scarred face. Cold eyes. He smiled. You won't shoot. You're trespassing at night with gasoline heading toward a structure. That's arson. I can defend my property. The smile died. I'm going to count. 1. He didn't move. 2. He dropped the can. Metal clanged hard. Kneel. Hands behind your head. He did. Not from fear. From calculated risk. I called police. 15 minutes later, red and blue lights cut through darkness. They cuffed him. Read writes. Vincent Crowley. Record longer than my driveway. Officer looked at me. He's not talking, but we found 2,000 cash in the truck. His phone has interesting messages. I knew who hired him. Haven't proven it yet, the officer said, but we're working on it. They told me to leave for a few days. I shook my head. This is my land. I'm not running. He nodded. Next morning, Sandra Kellerman was arrested. 7 a.m. Still in her bathrobe, in front of stunned neighbors. Roy sent me a video. I watched it once, turned it off. Vincent changed his mind fast. When facing years in prison, loyalty gets cheap. He confessed everything. Sandra hired him to burn the shed, scare me into backing down. I stood in the field as the sun rose, thought about the path she chose. When truth stopped obeying her, she chose fire. The community hearing happened 2 weeks after the arrest. The room was packed, air thick with tension. Reporters lined the walls. Residents filled every seat. I stood at the back, not hiding, just watching. Sandra arrived with an expensive lawyer. She'd traded the power suit for a softer look. Red eyes, tissues in hand, the persecuted victim. But everyone still remembered the handcuffs. The chair called for order. County planning rep spoke first. Dry, precise, reaffirmed what everyone already heard. The roads, parks, facilities, all sat on Tall Pines estate land. Ownership reverted to me when the lease expired. Then public comments began. An elderly woman stood, trembling, but her voice didn't shake. She spoke about the warning email the board received 2 years earlier, about how no residents were told, about the reserve fund being drained right after. When she finished, a few people clapped, not celebrating, just supporting. Next came a young couple, husband holding their baby, wife's voice shaking. We bought our home based on HOA assurances. Now the bank froze our loan because of access concerns. Then Roy stood. Sandra didn't just mismanage, he said. She poisoned this community, turned neighbors into informants, turned fear into law. Finally, someone I'd never met told Dorothy's story. The flower garden, the wooden house, how she was pushed into a nursing home over meaningless fines. The room went silent. Many people looked down. Sandra stared at the floor. The chair turned to her. Ms. Kellerman, were you aware the ground lease was nearing expiration? Her lawyer jumped up. My client. Sit down, the chair said firmly. This is a public hearing. Sandra stood, shoulders shaking. It's complicated, she said weakly. The previous board. Were you aware? He repeated. Sandra exploded. He's trying to destroy us, she screamed, pointing at me. He's greedy. He wants everything. I was protecting this community. The gavel struck. Again. Sandra didn't stop. Shouted about power, betrayal, how everyone owed her. Then, like her strength drained, she collapsed into her chair, sobbing. No script left. The chair waited for silence. The county's decision is as follows, he said. The HOA has 30 days to negotiate in good faith with the landowner to secure legal access. Failing that, the county will terminate use of public utilities on private land. Final blow. Within one afternoon, a petition to remove Sandra gathered enough signatures. Special meeting was called. The vote passed almost unanimously. Sandra Kellerman was removed. The remaining board members resigned on the spot. 1 week later, residents voted to dissolve the HOA entirely. No more fines. No more paint color lists. Only a simple road maintenance agreement remained. One issue left: the HOA assets. The clubhouse and pool sat on my land. A committee led by Roy came to see me, exhausted, humble. They asked if I'd buy the properties to help cover legal debts. "I'll buy it," I said, "and I'll pay $68,000. Roy looked surprised. "It's worth more than that." "I know," I replied. "That's the money that disappeared. Use it to make things right." Part of the money went to Dorothy. Part helped the young couple with their fraud case. Crestwood Meadows turned a new page. The trial happened 4 months later. I sat in the back row. No victory feeling, just the smell of old wood and cold lights. Sandra entered with her lawyer, hair unkempt, eyes darting. The prosecutor dismantled everything slowly. Fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy to commit arson. When Vincent Crowley testified, the room went still. He described how Sandra approached him, what she told him to do, how she paid him. "What if someone had been in the shed?" the prosecutor asked. Vincent shrugged. She didn't care. Sandra leapt up screaming. The judge struck the gavel. Her lawyer pulled her down. The jury deliberated 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Prison time. Restitution. Full payment for Dorothy's care for life. When the handcuffs closed, Sandra searched the room for someone's eyes. No one stood. Justice didn't need applause. I left the courtroom with Roy and a few neighbors. We didn't say much. Some things just need to be witnessed. A few weeks later, the court appointed a receiver for Sandra's assets. The wooden house that once belonged to Dorothy was sold. Money went straight into her care fund. Roy told me that in her final months, Dorothy smiled more. She knew the house her husband built was no longer in the hands of the person who took it. I returned to the community clubhouse. Once a symbol of exclusion. Walls lined with endless rule boards. Every line reading like a threat. I read them once, then took them all down. The iron fence around the pool was removed. Bushes trimmed low so anyone passing could see the blue water. I replaced expensive furniture with simple plastic chairs. Something you could sit on without asking permission. A new sign went up. Reclaimed wood. Hand-painted letters. Tall Pines Community Center. Everyone welcome. Pool passes were priced so anyone could afford them. Meeting room available for birthdays, gatherings. Ordinary moments once deemed not proper enough. That 4th of July we held a barbecue. I brought the meat. Everyone else brought dishes. Children ran across the grass laughing. People who once avoided eye contact now stood side by side talking about weather, work, small things. Roy brought an enormous bowl of potato salad. The young couple held their baby, passing the child gently from one set of arms to another. When the fireworks began, Margaret, the woman who asked the first hard question at the hearing, stood beside me. "Sandra would have fined everyone for this," she laughed. "Too loud. Not allowed." I looked up at the bright sky. Good thing she doesn't decide anymore. 1 year later, I sat on the community center porch, listening to children laugh in the pool. Roy sat beside me, told me Sandra was seeking early release, tried forming a management committee in prison. I laughed. Some people never change. A dog ran past on the trail. Owner waved. I thought about Dorothy, about the flower garden, about how sometimes to have lasting peace, someone has to stand up and demand what's right.